This episode of the AI XR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zapper. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zapper comes in. They've built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the 3JS rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to zapper.com and see what they can do for you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz. It's Friday, March 21st, and it's the AI XR podcast. We are headless today because he has important SynthB AI business.
You're Rony-less today.
Rony-less. I said Tedless. We are Rony-less. And we will miss him because the first story is so up his alley, I almost could mimic what he's going to say. But the big AI companies, which includes Meta, Google, OpenAI, and Grok, are directly lobbying for an exemption to copyright law. Yes. They are not denying that they've done it. They're just saying, let's not argue about free use. Let's just have a preemptive pardon right now so we can stop worrying about this.
Yeah, I feel like Rony will be popping in at any moment because he has so much to say about this and is so up in arms about it. And look, it's just, a harbinger of more of this to come. The fact that these companies are trying to skirt around people's IP.
Didn't we say this when Trump was elected? There'll be no regulation. I mean, they're going to write the AI law so that there's no regulation of at least the big tech companies.
Yeah.
And, again, this is a very unique situation that we've never had before in history. So, and it also plays into every bias the White House has, right? They hate the frickin' media. Yeah. Trump personally hates Hollywood because they compete with him. And, with Elon Musk as his closest advisor, and the tech oligarchs having bent a knee and no doubt bought them some Trump coin, are in a very influential position. So I just don't see how this movie has any other ending. I know Rony is going to be apoplectic, and he should be, because it diminishes the competitive positioning of SynthB. That is obviously something that he'll address. Rony is a brilliant guy, and I have total confidence that he will do it. Lots of AI and cinematic AI this week, Ted. These generating images has moved on to generating 3D images. And Roblox is increasing the amount of AI it is making available to its creators with its proprietary tool set, which is, right on brand for Roblox, because
no surprise. Their goal is low code to no code, right? So that anybody can build fun things using pre-built materials and pre-built procedurals, and AI is kind of the ultimate procedural, right? You're able to just plug in via text or video or picture or a combination and say, I want my game to do this and look like this, and it'll spit out the other side. And then the trickier part of this is, how do you hone it? How do you customize it? How do you clean it up when you ask an AI to sort of do all the work for you? And that's actually the harder part. But they're figuring that out as well. So, and they have, very strict limitations. Roblox is all about understanding how their tool set can work to scale. So I have no doubt they'll succeed at this, just like they succeeded at everything else.
Another company that's doing 2D to 3D is Stability AI. Remember, we were talking about them a few months ago because James Cameron joined their board of directors. So they've released a 2D to 3D. They're open source, but it can generate a tremendously big, tremendously long shots, which is very, very hard to do. But it operates, I guess, a little bit like Unreal. I guess this one in particular is compatible with Unity. So you can take these things, make them, and bring them into game development. So many of these tools have to do with game development, which is a little inside baseball, I think, for our listeners. But game development is incredibly expensive. And there are so many pain points in the process, right? Because it orchestrates so many different crafts and skills and artists. So if you can get a shortcut in any of those things, it will help an industry which is struggling a little bit right now, both with demand. There was an oversupply because of the pandemic, and also because of overall cost structure. Like the movie business, it's starting to overscale individual productions.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you talk about game engines and Unreal, and specifically when you look at companies that drove verticals and then realized there are other potential verticals in their toolkit that they didn't even realize that they would adopt or that people would adopt to, right? So AI is sort of becoming the new concept of what computer VFX for movies and TV shows will be. Like just like game engines became a new part of the tool set for traditional VFX vendors and creators, and everything starts to blend together because resolution is not a problem anymore, deliverables is not a problem anymore. So people find the best tool set, right? And game engines sort of dropped into a new business where AI is building a new business around what used to be called computer-based visual effects that were manual with computer assist, right? And now we're just removing the layers of the manual part. Game engines play a big part in that because they've always done that. So it's interesting.
So here's one right along these lines. Elon Musk's company, XAI, has acquired Hotshot, which is an AI powered video generation tool, yet another competitor to Via, Sora, Minimax, Luma, and the whole list. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and
very,
more
very crowded
ad
space.
infinitum, right? Yeah, yeah,
Very crowded space.
yeah.
So how are these companies going to differentiate from one another? Even the Google tools, and uh, they all have pluses and minuses, and different artists using different ones. So it's sort of still a wild west. And shockingly, by the way, most people don't know. This is not on the radar of anybody who's not inside of the industry because it's going on in every industry.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah.
So interesting that Musk is going to get into that game, but he wants to compete with OpenAI and everybody and everything with XAI.
I guess everybody in the sector feels like there will be enough business for everyone, or at least investment money is pouring in, so they're still able to build these companies. And we're going to see what I often refer to as the Seven Sisters effect, right? Where you've got seven versions of the same thing, and one or two of them will emerge as the leaders. Others will nibble around the edges, maybe sustain, and five or six of them will just go away or be absorbed by other companies.
So, well, here's a clue of what might be happening. Uh, Singapore-based Vidu um, is teaming up with an LA animation studio to make a legit animated series for television through Aura Productions and DT Carpenter, who's a teen targeted anime content specialist, I guess. And it's a legit show. They're investing some serious money in it. And I think these AI video generators may differentiate through different alliances. Runway is working with Kingsroad, for example. So they may differentiate through their alliances with major producers.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, they're all taking a bet that small ball will become big ball, right? That they'll get a hit and then they'll be able to build a business, which is no different than any other entertainment company that has leveraged technology in some way, shape, or form from the beginnings of our lives and the lives many before us. Is you find the technology that allows you to pursue your vision and potentially pursue your business model, and you hope you get a hit. And if you get a hit, you've got business, and then you can build it into a business. AKA, maybe we've heard of a company called Pixar, right? That it did that pretty well.
So FBRCAI at the AI Film Festival that was adjacent to South by Southwest, the this company is a sort of consultancy slash co-producer, sales, I don't know, research. It was founded by Rachel Joy Victor and Todd Terrazas, who put on
Yeah,
AI
Todd,
on a
yeah.
lot last year. Yeah. So they put out a report on what's going on with AI and AI production companies. And they identified probably the 9 leading companies. And we've talked about and had many of these guys as guests: Promise, Assyria, Secret Level, Shy Kids, Fable, and so forth. And then they highlighted 98 native AI first studios. Now, let
Wow.
me say, some of those studios, like Asteria, are big and are hiring, but most of them are shops that are 2 or 3 creators who have found some way to secure customers, whether they were contacted cold or whether they had some experience, previous experience. Many of them obviously are coming from the media business. So interesting that there is enough business to support 98 even small companies.
Well, there's enough investment capital to go around right now, I think is really what it is. And then we'll see, what companies make compelling enough content that drive an audience and drive engagement and eventually drive dollars to that. We'll have to see.
Well, here's let's we have our guest Bob Cooney standing by
Yeah.
in the Las Vegas airport. He fit us in during his transit from Las Vegas, where he just hosted a big location-based entertainment conference. So we'll hear about that. But one last story that I think is kind of fun, which is Nem Perez last year did a T2 remake, and it was made in an exquisite corpse format, right? 25 different filmmakers
Hmm.
contributed to it, and there's kind of Nem is kind of and his team. He's got Fred Grinstein and uh, a guy named Mindo, who are and Reza, who are helping him with the story. But mostly these are just independent 2-3 minute segments. Now, T2 was a delight. It was totally unwatchable. If you're not in the business and you don't know the creators, it's torture. But if you do, it's a really fun and well curated experience. And so they've chosen Alice in Wonderland, which is perfect for this method. And the technology has come so far. I'm really excited to see what they're going to turn out. And maybe it'll be a little more accessible than T2, which really was just for the community, I think.
Hmm.
But this could be much more accessible, and Alice lends itself to this stylistic
Yeah,
mission
yeah. This kind of
that the
crazy
exquisite
visual
words
sort of
create.
exploration. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
Interesting.
right, let's move on to Bob.
Bob's a good guy. Let's it'll be interesting to talk to him.
Bob Cooney from the Las Vegas airport. Great to
We're
see you.
so good to be here. I'm glad we could cram this in. Thanks for having me.
You're on your way back from your own conference, right?
Yeah, we ran the eighth VR arcade and attraction summit in Las Vegas this week.
Nice.
So you basically brought together everybody that you know in location-based VR.
It's kind of a self-indulgent party, I have to admit.
And location-based VR seems to be doing very well these days.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. It, started 2015, 2016 with Vive Port Arcade, and then the pandemic hit, and then everybody said nobody's ever going to want to put a face thing on again, and the arcade industry never really, to be honest with you, never really gelled with the business models, and and there are some outliers that seem to be working, zero latency and sandbox and stuff like that, but where it's exploding right now is in this art and cultural storytelling space, and that was a big theme. And then, some of the stuff my friend Brent Bushnell is doing, they just launched this Dream Park mixed reality theme park in Buena Vista Gardens during GDC and on the Third Street Promenade. And so there's a bit
But
big
he's
conversion.
using mixed reality for that.
He's using mixed. Oh yeah, we're gonna get caught up in the terminology.
Well,
It's all
it's
the same.
XR, whatever.
It's all the same. It's all reality
Two of the
television.
best things at South by Southwest were non-headset immersive
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. And look, so look, the challenge I get is I'm trying to help companies market this stuff to the consumers, and XR just doesn't mean anything other than it's inside baseball, right? And so we're still struggling with what do we call this stuff to engage consumers, and that's one of the big challenges I think we're still facing, and been talking about for 8 years, and we still don't have challenges. We don't have solutions yet.
Yeah, I always think it's less about the the hardware enablers and more about the experience, right? So
Absolutely.
if you go to theme park culture has been using some version of quote unquote virtual reality for many generations now, right? They
Yeah.
build simulations, they move you out of just a traditional flat screen experience and try and put you into a place that feels more than just going to a movie or watching a TV show. And
Yeah.
trying to tie that to a specific kind of range of hardware, I think, is actually more of a limiting factor than a success factor. So when you look at the purveyors that are successful at this, they don't care what hardware they use. They're just trying to achieve an objective, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the win, personally.
And look, there's a company out of France called Xcurio. They recently changed their name from Emissive. They have their top experience now. The most successful one is called Horizons of Khufu, and it's a tour of the ancient Egyptian pyramids. It's a 45-minute free roam experience in 10,000 square feet with up to 100 people at a time, and they call them immersive expeditions. And they only in their marketing material they just give a glimpse of a headset. They don't market the technology at all. And I think that's the key. And some people get there and they're like, "Oh, I didn't even know this was virtual reality." And then they put on the headset and they're blown away by it. And so you nailed it. It's about marketing the experience and about where is this going to take us, not how are we going to get there.
Yeah.
Marketing has always been such a huge obstacle, right? Because
Yeah.
most of these installations are single attractions. You don't have multiple. It's not like you own a bunch of grocery stores in a city.
Well, that's going to change. The theme this year at the conference was the downloadable theme park. And what I'm really excited about, and I've been talking to Brent Bushnell from Two Bit Circuits about this now for the last year, is we've got a common hardware platform. So we've got some standards have developed. Like everybody's using either HTC Vive or Pico. There's some people using Meta, but it's just not fit for purpose in LBE. And the tracking systems are all inside out tracking. And so the hardware platforms have kind of solidified around a standard. So now you could literally have a big track space and have multiple experiences where you put on a headset and you move from, Horizons of Khufu to a zombie shooter to, walkabout mini golf and almost build this kind of downloadable virtual theme park or family entertainment center. And that's where this thing is heading, I think, is different experiences, all in the same space, all in the same hardware,
Curated.
different peripherals, curated, and why not curated by an AI agent that walks you around and knows what you like to do, and so I'm really excited about where this space is going to be heading in the next 2 to 5 years.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your journey in this, and how long you've been in it, why you're in it.
Bob and I met in like 1994.
So
Yeah, how much time do we have, Ted?
Well, give us the highlights.
I'll give you the highlights. So I started in the pizza delivery business, actually in the mid '80s, late '80s. And I started my first business was when I was 17. I opened a pizza place in Hollywood, Florida. When I was 17, wound up I started the first really successful laser tag company. It was called Laser Storm. Started it in 1989. And we did the first license that I can tell licensed themed immersive entertainment back then. So we did Stargate laser tag with Studio Canal Plus. We recreated Monty Lundy from Technifex, who you guys might know, created this giant Stargate. You walk through with fog and light. And then there was this little company in Santa Monica. They had an office on the second floor of a strip center above a laundromat. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They're called Marvel Entertainment. This was prior to their bankruptcy reorganization. And we licensed X-Men. And we created the X-Men Danger Room in the mid-90s with laser tag. And so that was kind of my first foray into LBE. But in the early days, I worked with a company called Horizon Entertainment, which was owned by Edison Brothers Mall Entertainment, which was the largest mall retail chain they owned like dozens of fast fashion brands back then. And they were building, get this, in the early 90s, anchor entertainment centers in malls because malls were dying. Sounds familiar?
Shout out to Andy Halliday.
Andy Halliday, Andy Newman, who was the chairman of the board of Edison Brothers, came to my Laser Storm at Funplex in Denver, Colorado, and said, "We love this. We want to add this to our malls." And along the way, they acquired the rights to a product called Virtuality. which was the very first VR arcade system. And they didn't have a way to launch it. So they asked if I would help launch that in my LaserStorm booth at IAPA in 91 or 92. And so we built, the launch was a global phenomenon. We had press from like 45 countries. And then we built laser tag and virtual reality arcades in malls in the mid 90s. And so that was my first introduction to virtual reality. After LaserStorm, I helped start a company called Global VR, which was the first really successful VR arcade game. It was a game called Beachfront 2000. It was a turret shooter where you could spin around and look up. It was a boom mounted display. We sold thousands of those. They were every arcade in the world. And then VR went to sleep for a while, and I did a bunch of other stuff around like mobile payments and digital downloading jukeboxes and crazy bleeding edge stuff. And then I went to Oculus happened, and I went to IAPA in 2015. I met Brent Bushnell there. We were walking together, and I was researching an article that was going to be entitled "Don't Buy the Hype About VR," because we'd been here before and it died and it's never going to happen and blah, blah, blah. And I stumbled upon a company called Zero Latency. They had a little demo, 2-player demo where you walk around, and it was
Tim
a backpack-based.
Tim Roos is the
Tim
founder.
Roos.
We had him on the show, I think, 4 years ago, Ted.
A long time ago,
Yeah, and so Brent and I did the demo, and I walked out and I saw Tim, and Tim's this kind of mild-mannered Australian bloke, and I picked him up and I lifted him off the floor and gave him this giant bear hug, and he was terrified, right? Like he's like, "What's happening?" And
they have succeeded where many others have failed, including my company, Virtual World.
And I told him, I said, "Dude, you've done it. I've been dreaming about this for 25 years," because Andy Halliday and I sat back and looked at LaserStorm and virtuality and said, someday somebody's going to combine these and it's going to be amazing. And I flew to Australia a few months later to see their thing and convince them to let me help them launch. And then a company called Hologate came to me and said, "Hey, we've got this thing," and I helped them launch. And next thing you know, I became kind of a location-based VR guru. And for the last 10 years, it's where I'm spending all my time.
So if you look at an interesting sort of output of all that effort and other sort of luminaries that have been driving this form of, let's take the theme park out of the theme park and put it into other places, right? That's where the zero latency concepts and all these other things come out. One of the interesting sort of success cases at scale now are escape rooms, right? So how do you think of that business and how does that fit into, because some escape rooms actually
that's so interesting that you bring this up, Ted, because escape rooms are these bespoke one-offs all over the country, and that's kind of part of their charm. If there were sort of a chain of escape rooms and it wasn't reflecting this kind of popular community gameplay, I don't know if it would be.
Well, there are probably exciting. 4 or 5 chain escape rooms now. There's some in Century City that we see.
I know, but when you say chain, we're talking about places that are nascent.
6 or 7 locations
at the most,
not hundreds. Yeah.
I think there's
also,
a couple of things.
It's because of the amount of humans you need to run a decent escape room. It's not the highest margin business in the world.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarities between escape rooms and VR arcade. They're generally started by enthusiasts. They have some passionate fan bases that go and do them. They're not really broadly popular. Everybody's done one, but a lot of people haven't done 2 or 3. But there are people who have done hundreds, and so I think but the things I love about escape rooms is the storytelling aspect of it, right? It's really immersive. There's a lot of storytelling in it for it to be successful. And that's something that we're seeing now extend more into virtual reality. And I do want to shout out, there's a company that's doing amazing VR escape rooms. They're called VR Cave, and they're out of Canada. And they've been around for
Cave. Instead of VR Cave, it's VR Cave.
Cave, and they started out with backpacks, and now they're using standalone headsets, and the beauty of it is you build once, you deploy many times, and the economics of virtual reality, where you build it in software, you can create these amazing experiences. You can be on, like, one of my favorites is, and it's one of their oldest ones, is you're on a space station and you have to throw tools to each other in zero gravity, and somebody else has to like block these little meteorites coming at you while you're trying to repair the space station and solve these puzzles. And so, you're never going to build that in a physical escape room. And so the companies that do it best is they give you experiences you can't do in real life in the bounds of our physical world. And then they deploy it globally. And I think that, I'm excited to watch where this stuff is going, but I think escape rooms are in some ways really similar to virtual reality, but it's got that storytelling element that I think is that people love, and that's why it's so popular.
So let me ask you a nuanced technical question that I'm curious if you have a take on. Because those of us that spend a inordinate amount of time in these simulation-based systems and concepts and using headsets, as a means to an end, there is a mild to significant difference between inside-out tracking and outside-in tracking. When it looks like someone's coming through there. Yeah, your background is not
scenery.
virtual.
Yeah,
You're
they
really
want
in
to
an
use
airport
the
right
slot next to Bob.
now. You're really in an airport right now with your camera on your luggage or something like that.
What would make it perfect if someone was smoking and having a drink behind him?
Well, I'm sure there are. We just can't see
Because
them.
it's 8:15 in the morning.
Las Vegas. They're definitely drinking.
Keep
That
going,
would
Ted,
very
I'm
Las
listening.
Vegas.
So the question for you, Bob, is: do you have do you recognize the difference and the nuance between a system that uses cameras and sensors to track a headset on your face and how precise it can be, and how that simulation works better than using inside-out tracking, where the headset is bouncing and then receiving that information back? The simulation is never as good. I'm curious if you have a take on that.
Look, my take is my world is about consumers doing kind of casual out-of-home entertainment, and for that market, it doesn't matter. It's all about economics. It's about throughput. It's about ease of deployment, ease of operation, and look, I
Revenue
spent
per square foot and so forth.
revenue per square foot and labor cost is the only metrics that matter. And look, there's some the other one is PCVR stream, which is now Wi-Fi 6E or 7 streaming versus standalone, and the XR2 chipset is amazing, but you're only going to get so many polygons. You're not going to get the shading and the textures and stuff that create these amazing experiences. But we finally have a data point. I've been saying that the quality of the visuals don't matter, and it's a very controversial take, and I understand that.
100% agree.
And so, but recently we have data now. So Horizons of Khufu went literally ex curio, went from backpacks PCVR to standalone. And I've been tracking the online reviews and the comments and the ticket prices as they've made that migration. No change. 4.85 across the board, consumer reviews, and the ticket price hasn't changed. And so customers just don't know the difference. They just don't
If the
care.
game is good enough, it becomes about the gameplay and the interaction and the other people present in the simulation.
Yeah.
And that is so powerful that, we've been saying for years that, what VR needed was a small portable device that wasn't that expensive, that was, kind of instant. You put it on and you're in VR. And, we have that, and we've had it for 5 years now.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that the problems that VR is having, and this is with home units, Bob, I don't think that's related to the graphic quality at all. I think it's related to experiences. There aren't enough experiences like Walkabout Mini Golf that are relentlessly engaging.
Oh, look, I question. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that's a symptom. It is as much a symptom as it is a the lack of content is more of a symptom than a cause. I think the real cause that consumer VR isn't catching on to, one is comfort. Like, you just can't wear a freaking headset for more than a half an hour without it hurting your face. Period. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it's really brutally uncomfortable.
A lot of us get
which I don't
hour.
understand. I don't understand why at this point you can't make it comfortable. And the second thing, which is the bigger one, is friction. Like, I try to get people into VR, and I do demos, and often it'll take, if I can get it up and running in 15 minutes, that's a freaking miracle. And often it'll take 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I got to download an update, then the controllers have to download, then I have to download an update to the game because the OS has changed, and then you have to figure out the anchors and the space, and then it doesn't hold, and then next thing you know, you're oriented that way when you should be oriented that way. And for how much money Meta has put into R&D for this, the fact that they haven't figured that piece out yet just boggles my mind. Sorry, rant over.
Yeah,
it's a good rant, though. I enjoy it.
And Ted, there's one other core tech thing that I'm really excited about. I want to mention this week at GDC, and they've been teasing it for a while. Vicon just released their markerless motion capture system, and it's been in a Pioneer program now for about a year and a half. And I'm really excited about markerless mocap and what it's going to do for both on the content development side for these, LBE deployments where you don't have to worry about inverse kinematics because it's just hard. Apparently, it's hard to do. I don't know why, but it's never good. And you go in these things and your elbows up here and your head's down there, and it really destroys the immersion. But the ability to get rid of all the wearables that you have to do for good hand and foot tracking is now, that's going to go away. And so I'm really excited about how markerless mocap is going to enable a better, a better experience for people, because you're going to be able to track body parts better, and then you're going to be able to do really cool things with that wearables.
Yeah, agreed.
So it's interesting. There have been some interesting failures and some interesting success stories. The failures, in my opinion, timing, the cost of rents at the time, throughput, utilization, all the usual suspects. And of course, in virtual worlds case, we just wasted an enormous amount of real estate that didn't generate the revenue we thought it would through food and beverage. And we had a lot of the same problems that Vive and others had, because if you put it in what you think is a high traffic location, suddenly now you've got the same throughput problem that a movie theater has. But a movie theater
you're paying for the rent for the people who you might not actually be converting. Because a lot of this stuff
what happens is, of course, your throughput catches up with you. People walk out, they want to do the Spider-Man experience after the Spider-Man movie, but there's no availability for 45 minutes. So they walk out and they never come back. So, it's unlike the movie theater. You can't do 300 people at once when 300 people are there.
Yeah.
And so, there's scheduling problems, but I'm interested. So many failed because of that. You mentioned virtuality, which was a very, very, very early execution of a headset, and it needed a magnetic ring, and they had all these very cumbersome workarounds to the problems. And the thing cost $60,000. At $1 a minute, you have to sell 60,000 hours in that to break even, and you needed one attendant for every user.
Yeah.
So those terrible economics notwithstanding, we do have some success stories today. Some, like virtuality, like Tim Roos's company,
Zero
Latency, has 40-something locations, I think now.
110, Charlie.
Do they really? Well, good on them, and they really are a success story that, an overnight success that took 10 years.
Yeah, they found a business model, right? On top of making it entertaining and fun.
And why, Bob? Why are they succeeding where so many others have failed?
Yeah, so the key to success in this market today is you have to deliver the entire ecosystem value chain in a turnkey solution. And so many companies that are struggling are trying to rally the ecosystem where they play one or two roles in the ecosystem, but there's 8 roles you have to fulfill, and trying to rally an ecosystem to build scale and velocity in any market that's emerging is just impossible. And so because zero latency was really early, I think Sandbox is another example of this. There was no ecosystem, so they had to make their own.
I was going to bring up Sandbox. I was going to bring up Sandbox next. We've had that.
Yeah. And so I think for zero latency, they've done a couple of things that a lot of companies don't do. One is they've made their own technology obsolete 3 times now. They haven't waited for the competition to say okay, and they stuck to their game. They went from backpacks and a I don't even remember what it was called, OSVR headset, I think, that open source headset thing that was a kind of a bit of a disaster. Then they started with Oculus, then they went to that. Then they went to the Windows mixed reality system, Windows MR, when that released with the HP headset. And then they quickly, as soon as HTC Focus 3 hit the market and Wi-Fi 6E became available, they immediately pivoted. They were like the first company to roll that out. And so they timed the moves as the tech obsolescence window has happened to stay ahead of that curve each time. Now, it made some of their existing customers who had bought the old technology challenging, but then they worked with them to give them deals to upgrade to the new technology. And so they've stayed on the cutting edge of, not the bleeding edge, but the cutting edge of the tech evolution curves over 10 years. And I think I don't think a lot of people realize that's what they've done, and they've done a masterful job of it, better than anybody else in the industry. And it's brought the price down. It went from, when they started, it was 800,000 Australian for a system, and then it went to 350,000, and now they're selling turnkey systems, with an arena for less than 200 grand. And so They're riding the price curve down and the tech capability up, and they're sticking to their knitting. They're not trying to do all things to all people. They're a first-person shooter platform. They know how to attract people who want to play first-person shooter games, and it's probably the best first-person shooter experience, maybe short of Eva, on the PvP side in France, that I think you can do in the world. And they just stuck to their knitting.
Yeah. So I'll throw this out to you because your take on this will be interesting. You talk about the success case of zero latency, which is a fantastic sort of marker in how do you get it right? How do you get it
Yeah.
right enough to sustain a business and grow a business? The three sort of spectacularly marketed, created, and aspirationals that ultimately didn't work. Your friend Brent with 2-Bit Circus in downtown
Yeah.
LA. The Void, our friend Ken, which was
the Void, and let us say both the Void and
Dreamscape was my third
had
one.
excellent content. It was not about their content.
And the Void really took the concept of a theme park experience, fully deployed it. They got it in Madame Tussauds. It was in Times Square. You got the Ghostbusters IP. It was a full experience.
So
all
good.
Your senses were
So
activated.
Ghostbusters was the ultimate.
So where do you? But ultimately, all of those either had to pivot out and find new styles of use case for their tech and their concepts, or just ended up going away or just re-evolving. So what's your overall take on it?
I think the Void and Dreamscape are very similar. They overinvested in tech and content. The content costs were development costs were way too high. I think they thought they maybe could amortize it over more locations. The location strategy was challenging. They were paying really high rent, Dreamscape in Beverly Hills, the Void in Westfield, London. So in VRLA 2017, I think it was, I don't remember who the CEO of the Void was at the time, but he got up there and did a case study. And one of the things he said was, at the Void in Westfield, London, 70% of the people who did the Void had never been to the mall before. And he was kind of bragging about that. And I'm thinking, wait a second. You're not big enough to get anchor tenant rent, so you're paying full mall retail for traffic that you can't convert. And then you're having customer acquisition cost on marketing to drive people in. It's a flawed business model.
Well, they had two incredible problems, right? One is they needed way too many employees to operate.
Too much labor.
And most of the time, those employees were hanging out or playing with each other.
I never saw. Charlie, I went to almost every Void location on the planet. And, I'm not sure I ever saw that. I thought their employees were working really hard.
I saw it all the time. We had the same problem at Virtual World. I mean, you have a utilization problem.
I was there when it was
in the middle of the day. People are busy doing other things.
Yeah. I think the core issues were the underpinned economics of the business were flawed based on their real estate strategy. Their labor cost was too high. The technology deployment cost was too high. The content development cost was too high. And they just couldn't. And look, one of the foundational problems in VR we haven't solved yet is if the ticket prices, people don't understand the value of VR until they've done it. And especially with something like the Void or Dreamscape, which is a mind-blowing, right? And so how do you get people across the threshold the first time? There's a price resistance. There's research from the Immersive Entertainment Network in Manchester that says that people who have never done VR think the average experience is worth $20 to $40. People who've already done VR are willing to pay over $100 for an experience. How do you cross that chasm in consumer perception and price elasticity? And that's a problem we haven't solved yet. We need to figure out a sampling strategy in the industry. And that's something that I'm, trying to help the industry try to figure out this year, because it's actually holding back the profitability of the business.
Well, I think part of that goes back to this theme park understanding that price elasticity has always been tested, but it's all about dwell time in the environment, right? You have a perception as an audience member, as a family member, that if you're going to spend the entire day in this experience, then in today's economics, you're going to actually spend about a couple $100 per person, and that is an acceptable threshold. The idea that you're in something for 11 to 14 minutes and it's $40 to $60 becomes psychologically problematic for a lot of audience members. So.
And what happens is the operators aren't sophisticated in pricing models, and what they're doing is they're commoditizing the experience because they're pricing it per minute in their mind. And this is something I've been railing against forever. And part of the reason for that is because everything should be 3 acts in this space. There should be an entry, the setup, the conflict, the resolution, and we do a shitty job of the setup and a no job at all of the resolution. When I did my first zero latency, they booted me out into a parking lot in a warehouse district in North Melbourne at night, and I had just had this amazing transformational experience, and I walked out and I'm like, holy crap, what was that? And now what do I do? And so we have to figure out how to handle the dwell time thing and try to the longer experience. I think that's a truth bomb right there. Thank you.
I mean, Meow Wolf has figured that out as the alternative theme park experience, right? It's an
Absolutely.
hour to an hour and a half. You spend the appropriate amount of money to be there, and it's built in a place where you go to Area 15. I imagine you were there on this trip or other trips, where you can sort of be there and long enough that you have that experience, that you felt like the time and the effort to get there and be there was worth it. And that's sort of the new theme park concept.
Yeah, and Joe Pine talks about this time, in the experience economy, it's time well invested, time well spent. And it really is about that whole experience. And again, we're an emerging industry, right? Everybody's enamored with the tech, and we'll figure it out. It's just there's going to be a lot of corpses in the graveyard along the way.
Yeah, there have been and there will be more. Sure. I mean, that's part of the
Who was the third? There was a third. Well, you were talking about
Void, Dreamscape, and of course 2-Bit Circus. Brent,
2-Bit Circus, totally different issue. So 2-Bit, came up with this concept of the micro amusement park. I think, and Brent just delivered the keynote at my event this week, and and he went through, and I said, I want you to talk about the lessons learned over your career, which is unbelievable. 15 years of craziness, almost 20 years. But I think 2-Bit's problem was obviously, the pandemic really brutalized that business. They were shut down for 18 months. And look, a lot of businesses closed under the cover of the pandemic, and I think the Void is one of those. They blamed the pandemic when they shut down, but they were in trouble way before the pandemic hit. I actually think the pandemic hurt 2-Bit really badly. Like, they were shut for 18 months, and it's a retail business, and they had to pay rent. But it was also a bit under attraction. There just wasn't quite enough to do there, and I think that once the pandemic hit and they lost a lot of capital through that, they didn't have the legs to go ahead and continue to experiment and try to perfect the model. And then they tried to open another location when they hadn't figured out all the problems with the first location, and that extended them too much.
But on the other hand, Area 15 which is a similar concept, has done well in Vegas, and they're moving to Orlando.
They're not moving to Orlando. They killed the Orlando project.
That's news.
And look, and some of that is because they decided to expand the Vegas project, right? And Universal's coming in there now with a permanent installation. I want people to be really careful. Like, we often observe things and we think because they exist and people are there or other people are copying it, that dictates success. And it's not until you see the P&L that you know something's successful. And Winston's done a great job, but he's a real estate developer, and as a real estate development, Area 15 is probably a blockbuster success. As far as the individual tenants in there, I think there's wins and losses. It's just a shopping mall. It's an amazing, interactive, immersive shopping mall, but it's just a shopping mall. And then it's up to you to be able to go in there and make a business. And Meow Wolf has done really well, but there's been some turnover in some of the other immersive stuff. And so for me, I think you really have to look at it a little bit more granularly.
But that just makes sense. Some things work and some things don't. And, they have enough throughput through the Vegas experience that they can move millions of people through it over the course of a year, and it works, right?
But the rents are really high, right? And so you talk about, rent, and if you're going to go into a place where you're going to pay 60, 70, 80, $100 a square foot, man, you better be able to convert the traffic that's there. Otherwise you're going to die. And I think that's something that marketing, again, continues to be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, here's another vein of something you might have insights on that your perspective will probably be different than others. The Apple Vision Pro and what it does, what it doesn't, and what you think.
Oh, you're killing me. I was so excited, man. I was so excited when they stepped in, and look, I think it's a disappointment. I think it's a disappointment to everyone. The things that I love about the Apple Vision Pro is the UX, like the gaze to pinch is going to be the new mouse click. Everybody's copying it. And that is probably, if there was one innovation there that's going to change our industry over time, it's that. But again, wearability, it hurts. I don't understand how they didn't nail that. And a lot of people said it was a dev kit. I kind of pushed back on that and said, no, it's not. It's a consumer product, but it's a consumer product for really wealthy early adopters. I think we were both right on that one. Yeah, man, I think it's just, and we needed that to be a success because it was so hyped. It was so, all the marketing money behind it. And then it's been a disappointment. And I'm not going to call it a failure, but because again, I think, I look at the long picture. We've been in this for a long time, and no one thing is going to take the industry down. But what an opportunity missed for the XR industry to really build a device that captured the imagination of people. And the price point was like, I wanted to buy one. I couldn't do it. I put it in my cart. By the time I was done with the case and Apple Care and all that shit,
It's
it was
$5,000.
$4,500.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't
It's real money.
do it.
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed.
I think we agree with all that. I think the other interesting thing to know about Apple as a company is they're in it for the long game, right?
Absolutely.
And there are nuggets of what that thing does when you put on and look at some of the experiences, especially the sort of passive immersive video, that are essentially head and shoulders above any other device in the world of what it can do to just allow you to watch something passively and enjoy it in an immersive space.
Yeah.
So I think once they're in a sector, it's just another compute sector for them. They will not leave that sector. They'll just keep sort of whirling their sort of spin wheels like a butterfly or a caterpillar, and just keep moving down that road.
Look, I agree with you. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We're all going to be using the technology at some point in the future. I've stopped saying 5 years because I've been saying that for 10 years. But at some point, the experiences are amazing, and the usability is so much better, and it's so much more human. It's a human way to interact with technology. It's voice, it's eye gaze, it's hand gestures. Mouse and keyboard is not a human way. We've had to adapt our behavior to fit the computers. And what the XR technology does is it allows us to use human interaction, and the computers are adapting to the way we move. And to me, that's the biggest innovation of what we're seeing in this space. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Bob, you're on the move. It looks like they're getting ready to board.
They're getting ready to open the bar. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. The bar has to open in Vegas.
So one last question for you, and then we really got to shoot. Future of the mall and role of location-based entertainment. And in fact, the whole mall is becoming location-based entertainment, right? That's the reason to go there.
We saw this in the 90s. Everything repeats itself. Look, it's really interesting. I was along the thing of malls are dead, mall space is affordable. And then I went and looked at the recent ICSC report. And freaking mall rents are at an all-time high right now. Retail real estate has actually made a huge comeback in the last year. It blew me. I was like, what? I had to double check the data, and CBRE backed that up with their research. And so, I think that we look at the headlines and we remember, look, the news media loves death and dismay, right? Dirty laundry. And so everybody over-reports the bad, but they never report the good. And malls have come back. And mall real estate's come back, and rents are up again. And so, it's really interesting, and it's worth digging into. And so, but there are.
Well, that's sort of like, wow, mind exploding.
I know. I looked at that, and it was only the last couple of months that I saw that data, because I was writing a business plan myself, and I was like thinking about the great opportunity for real estate, and obviously there's good malls and bad malls, and the same thing we saw back in the 90s. But
that's always been true, right? I mean, location.
Location. I will tell you one amazing opportunity in real estate, though, in America, is all the Walgreens and CVS. There's like, I don't know, 10,000 to 20,000 square foot freestanding buildings that need to be repurposed. And that's a massive real estate opportunity if somebody could figure out a model. So there'll always be pockets of real estate that you can get into. But yeah, malls, I'm not going to prognosticate against malls because this is new data for me and I haven't quite made sense of it yet. Yeah.
Bob, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. And I hope we can get together in the real very soon.
Absolutely. I'm going to be spending more time in Southern California and Las Vegas. I've got an exciting project that I'm building in Las Vegas. I've been on the sidelines of VR for 10 years. I'm getting in. I'm diving in with both feet. The time is now.
It's hard to be a guy who watches other kids play.
Well, I've been watching and waiting for the business models to emerge, and I finally found it. And this high throughput, free roam VR with 50, 80, 100 people at a time at high ticket prices and low capex. Time is now to build, man. This is it.
All right.
Hey, well, that's a tough one to leave on, so we'll have to bring you back. Because
that's our show this week. That's our show this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back next Friday.
Rock on, guys.
Thanks, Bob. Fly home safe.